Retcon is a weird word. It's a word you only hear in very particular contexts. Comic books, film, conversations about intergalactic wars, and yet it's a simple word. It's shorthand for retroactive continuity, a piece of new information in a fictional work that imposes a different interpretation on previously described events. It's kind of a dirty word in the ether of today's popular culture. And there's a good reason for this. It's a device often used to stomp on something beloved, to change something no one really wanted touched in the first place. Rather ironically though, I think one of the very worst examples of retconning that doesn't include a total rewrite of decades worth of film lore is a retcon that actually proves one nearly indisputable reality. That Futurama is one of the greatest pieces of modern television, and it's not all that hard to see why.
In the name of all that is good and logical, we give thanks for the chemical energy we are about to absorb.
Futurama is the brainchild of Simpsons creator Matt Groening and David X. Cohen. But despite the pedigree, it's handled almost in complete juxtaposition to this.
This.
Where The Simpsons is a narrative situation-driven comedy meant to parallel the nuclear sitcoms of the 80s and 90s, Futurama was a character-focused journey through the year 3000, from the ground up flipping genre expectations on its head. This was a show about science, about its tropes, the unexplained, and how it can be used as a lens for understanding the modern human experience. Oh, and as you've probably heard before, its writers knew what they were doing, with nearly the entire team having advanced mathematics and scientific degrees and backgrounds. Masters, doctorates, you name it. But I think what Futurama really got right was our lack of understanding about what the future would be. We don't know what the world will be like in 1,000 years, and so instead of taking your traditional sitcom tropes and transplanting them into this future world, the show instead subverts those expectations to create genuinely interesting ideas, visual introspections about God, what it means to be human, about the ethics of today's scientific problems. Things most network comedies don't normally touch on. Where The Simpsons had to contend with being an animated sitcom about a world that isn't all too different from ours when you strip down its cartoony nature, Futurama, through great writing and design, created a new world, a new lens through which to explore life, almost always grounded by real science. That's a tough tightrope to walk, especially because science and foreign worlds aren't entertaining concepts on their own. And that's where we find ourselves back at that word, retcon.
I like you, Seymour. You're not constantly judging me like all the other dogs. Are you? Nah.
This is the season 4 episode Jurassic Bark, universally known as one of the show's best episodes and Emmy-nominated television. In this episode, Fry comes across his dog's petrified remains in a museum attempting to preserve the 21st century. It's been 1,000 years since his dog Seymour was alive. This stirs up mixed emotions in him. He loved Seymour like we all do our pets, and a professor using 31st century technology offers to clone Seymour. Bring him back to the 31st century, and unlike most sci-fi cloning stories, there's a smart subversion. Seymour would retain all of his previous memories. But Fry realizes that his long since passed dog had lived 12 years after he had been frozen. This dog had lived a full life, moved on, made new memories with new people, found companionship elsewhere, and thus Fry decides to move on, to accept Seymour's fate, his death. But we, the viewer, find out that Seymour hadn't or didn't do any of those things. He never did move on after Fry was frozen, figuratively and literally. He sat in front of the pizza shop every day for 12 years, waiting for Fry to return, maintaining hope that he'd be back until the day he died. It is gut-wrenchingly sad, superbly written TV. It is one of the most emotionally impactful pieces of animation you'll ever see. But that was Futurama's greatest strength, what separated it from other pieces of animation: sophistication in character, growth. Jurassic Park is a script that relies solely on character, on articulation of personality. We understand Fry a bit better over the course of that 23 minutes, how he thinks, how he deals with sadness, and those pieces of his personality, his decision-making, stay with him throughout the rest of the entire series. They mold him. There is no reset the following episode or season like we so often see even in serialized television shows. Jurassic Park is an exploration of grief. It asks a simple human question. Is there finality in death? Or better yet, should there be? How do we really feel about death as humans? Are we worried about what comes after for us? Or how we're remembered by other people, or if we are at all? Should we just be happy we had that time in the first place, those moments? And that's all explored through one character and a dog. That's how you write television. But what if I told you the same show tried to kind of take it all back? That it retconned all of that and inadvertently posed a very similar question, seemingly back at itself.
Oh, hey, Mr. Panucci. I'm back from that delivery to the cryogenic lab.
Bender's Big Score is an 89-minute Futurama special. A not quite traditional episode, but not quite a movie piece of Futurama's story created in 2007. It's a fun story that's reasonably well written and entertaining to boot, but it does something I think is kind of strange. See, in Bender's Big Score, a time-traveling version of Fry decides to stay back in the past, or the current 21st century as it is in the show, and that time-clone version of the character spends 15 years with Seymour, that companionship remaining throughout the entirety of the dog's life up until the moment he is petrified. So instead of sitting outside waiting for Fry as we originally knew the story to go, Seymour had now been saved to live a happy, generic puppy life. This is what a retcon looks like, and a particularly egregious one at that. While it's a nice thought to give Seymour a new lease on life and a redemption of his relationship with Fry, it removes the impact, the emotional substance from the original Jurassic Park entirely. Again, one of the show's greatest episodes. An episode once about the cruel realities of life, relationships, and death becomes an exercise in futility as we now know there's a better fate awaiting Seymour. We now simply put up with this story, knowing full well it isn't the reality that coalesces. In Jurassic Park, there's a struggle in Fry to answer the question of whether or not he wants to face the sadness of Seymour having forgotten him. He struggles with the very human question of whether or not we should simply appreciate the past rather than attempt to relive or change it. Whether we should create new adventures, build on the ones we had, learn from them, instead of try to walk back over those original footprints. The irony being that this retcon seems to inadvertently answer that question for its audience. In Futurama's world, at least in Bender's Big Score, it isn't live and let be for the show or anything else. I think that Jurassic Park is a great example of why people are so passionate about that word retcon. Why arguments break out on the internet over the Force and midichlorians, or decisions made in the pages of ink-printed comic books. Why every bad reboot and poorly written blockbuster sequel meets the same reaction. Why no one saw the new Men in Black. Why no one wants a new Back to the Future. My interest in this trend has much less to do with Futurama, a show I think is borderline immaculate and great from beginning to end, and more to do with the current state of media in general. It isn't fun when the things you care about are screwed with. And this isn't isolated to internet culture, and there's a right way to change these things and an equally obvious wrong way. But Futurama makes this as clear as any other example I could use. In the case of Jurassic Park, its retcon undermines one of the best pieces of television of that era. It screws with something that was arguably near perfect to begin with. It does nothing but expose everything that made Futurama so great, but through error. It does it while taking those things away from one of its greatest accomplishments, for something that for just one moment feels cheap. By changing it, by revisiting it, by not simply looking forward and building upon it, you can do much more harm creatively than good. Futurama dared to be the show that left Seymour outside of a pizza shop for 12 years. Maybe sometimes it's better to remember and appreciate the moment. Appreciate art, instead of trying to teach an old, much better dog new, less interesting tricks.
You know, I was God once.
Yes, I saw. You were doing well until everyone died.
It was awful.
Well guys, that is it for today's episode of Nerdstalgic. Obviously, using Futurama here as more of a parable for what I believe to be happening throughout most of Hollywood and television lately. But if you enjoyed this video, press that like button down below. If you haven't yet done so, also press subscribe. That way you don't miss anything I put out. Next to the subscribe button is a little bell. If you hit that notification bell, you'll be notified when I upload, which is obviously a big deal and helps me out a lot. And I do want you guys to know there are some huge Nerdstalgic announcements coming in the next video, so be on the lookout for that. Stuff I'm really excited about and I hope you guys will love. Really quickly, today's video is sponsored by Raycon. Raycon earbuds start at about half the price of other premium wireless earbuds on the market. They sound, at least to my ears, about as good as anything else I've used, and they actually fit a bit more comfortably. And because of that, they really are multi-purpose earbuds because of the way they fit. They're great for working from home, working out, listening to music, podcasts, whatever you're doing. They're great everyday earbuds. Their new everyday E25s are their best model. You can get 6 hours on one charge, seamless Bluetooth pairing, a bit more bass, and a nice design. If you click the link in the description below, you can get 15% off your Raycon order. That's buyraycon.com/Nerdstalgic. Mine are here, they're amazing. I've actually been using them more than my AirPods recently. Follow that link down below for that 15% off. It helps me out a ton. And also it'll get you some really good, really affordable earbuds. On your screen right now are 2 more videos. You can check those out to see what I've done recently, the most recent episodes of Nerdstalgic, and hopefully I will see you guys in the next video.